You're listening to COB Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharavana Raghavan.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. Sharvana Raghavan at our disposal today, uh, and it is my turn to interview him. Now, he has been busy doing branding and brand strategy for a lot of small business owners. So, that is where we start from, and I would then progress to asking him about how his experience has been and what is his advice basis all of his work that he has done for all the small business owners as well as startup owners. So let me start.
It's
So,
I've known you for what? Maybe for about 15 years, and I still can't get over the fact how you pronounce my full name. I know
Hmm.
even a voiceover makes my name sound funny, but yeah, that's why we stick to Sharon. Simpler for everybody.
Correct. No, no, it is. It is. Okay. So tell me, Sharon, you've been interacting with a lot of small business owners. What's your observation? What is their outlook like, especially towards branding?
Right. So that's why I picked this topic to kick off the entire podcast itself, right? To say we are going after the small businesses to help them build mega brands and build better brands. And what I notice with a lot of the startup founders is that they are very focused on efficiency. And even as Indians, we have been very efficiency driven. Like good things for cheap is always how the countries evolve. And that's their mindset. And they don't necessarily have, I'm not saying all, a lot of them don't necessarily have a long term perspective on the kind of brand they want to build or even look to take the efforts to build a brand.
Hmm.
So if you look at, say, the big brands that exist in India, right? Most of them, Tata's, Godrej's, and these are brands that have not been built as brands. They made something great or something good for cheap. They brought in manufacturing efficiency,
Hmm.
which has built credibility over time, and they have managed to capture people's imagination and get a sense of trust. And that has become a brand for them today. And that's been built over generations.
Hmm.
And if we keep waiting for generations to build brands, I think our growth pace is never going to pick up.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And a brand is what creates value for a business. So
Hmm.
I have this theory, and I mean, I'm sure it's proven also that when you run just a business, every transaction you have starts from a zero base.
Hmm.
And when you build a brand, every transaction happens on an incremental plane and
Hmm.
therefore accelerates growth. So, especially today, when all startups are under pressure to deliver growth,
Hmm.
everybody's looking at cutting spends, cutting expenses, laying off staff. But what they can actually do is focus on building a brand that will
Hmm.
actually accelerate their growth even more. And that is
Hmm.
something that's not even in a lot of people's peripheral vision.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Hmm. Hmm.
that is what we need them to build. So they look at, say, they are so much focus on this MVP, the minimum viable product,
Hmm.
but there is no minimum viable brand that's being built.
Hmm.
And anything the product wants, there's a pivot happening, there are changes happening, teams coming in, teams going out.
Hmm.
And that is, again, focused on efficiency and productivity, but that does not translate to the brand you want to build.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
after a point, so I put up this post on LinkedIn recently and had a bit of backlash also, where I
Hmm.
said, by
Hmm.
the time you realize you need to build a brand,
Hmm.
it's usually too late.
Hmm.
Almost it's irrevocable at a point
Hmm.
because you build a brand in so many different directions, even without even meaning to.
Hmm.
And when you say, I need to build a brand, my brand has to pull its weight,
Hmm.
that's when you realize you haven't built a brand
Hmm.
and you're almost like starting from scratch.
Hmm. You were just
And
being provocative.
I always be provocative
Hmm.
because that's the only way to get a conversation going
Yeah. Yeah.
for my style. And
Hmm.
yeah, the whole point is if you let brand be incidental,
Hmm.
then maybe your great grandchild will see your business become a
Hmm.
brand if it survives until then. But 95% of the businesses do not.
Hmm.
So
So, to
yeah,
be fair, most of them don't leave brands to be incidental. They just think of possibly branding as set of activities like logo designing, website, uh, product label, etc.,
mm,
etc. Yeah.
right.
So, to be fair to everybody who is listening to us, they have tried to do whatever they could from a branding perspective. Now, for the benefit of our listeners,
Mm.
would you also be able to say what else would you include under the umbrella of branding?
It's not about what I would or would not include, right? It's about understanding the difference between branding and brand building.
Hmm.
So when you say you have branding done, so a lot of people, even before you start a business, you get your logo done, you get your website done, and you get your collateral, you probably even get your t-shirts done.
Hmm.
And I call it the shiny object syndrome. It's an SOS
Hmm.
because you want to tell everybody what you're doing. It's a badge you want to wear.
Hmm.
But what does that mean? What does it stand for? Who is it for? Yes, your employees will wear your t-shirts if you make them fit. But why should consumers wear it? Why should your customers wear it?
Hmm.
Will your vendors wear it?
Hmm.
So when you build a brand, it's not just about the collateral you're building. Yes, collateral is important,
Hmm.
but that is just part of branding.
Hmm.
Brand building is a far more holistic process.
Hmm.
It covers the entire business,
Hmm.
and it's beyond tangibles.
Hmm.
So if you say, I have this theory where I keep telling people that whether you're selling a product or a service,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
are in the experience business.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now,
Hmm.
what is the experience you're delivering to not just your customers? Now, today
Hmm.
businesses need to be very stakeholder friendly. That's across everybody, your employees, your vendors, your investors, your customers and consumers, as we call them in the FMCG parlance.
Hmm.
What is the experience you're delivering to all of them?
Hmm.
And that makes a brand. And without a singular vision or focus, this brand will never get built. It
Hmm.
can get built in many different ways, and that's even worse than not building a brand.
Hmm.
And that is the difference between a brand,
Hmm.
getting a branding done, and
Hmm.
actually building a real brand for the ages.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. Fair. So, for a lot of us, the purpose of branding is to differentiate yourself from everybody else who exists in the market. Now,
Fair?
suppose I am a business like Paytm, where I
Mhm.
have a big market and I was the first mover.
Hmm.
Do I still need branding?
Paytm did have the first mover advantage,
Hmm.
but where are they today?
Hmm.
They missed the bus on UPI.
Hmm.
And does that mean the brand has no significance? No, they did invest in branding.
Hmm.
They missed the bus on the technology front.
Hmm.
So it is to say today, not just today, it's risen over the ages where the marketing theory of the first mover advantage being sacrosanct doesn't exist anymore.
Hmm.
It's not about who can do things first at all. It's
Hmm.
about who can do things better.
Hmm.
We all use Google today, and we
Hmm.
know what Google did to Yahoo.
Hmm.
And I'm sure you and I are old enough. I'm sure some of our listeners are also old enough to have used Orkut before they got onto
Hmm.
Facebook.
Hmm.
Now, whoever remembers Orkut anymore?
Hmm.
And this, I mean, you don't necessarily have a first mover advantage anymore. And
Hmm.
therefore, just a tangible difference in your product does
Hmm.
not guarantee success. It can give you a short term success,
Hmm.
but not for the long term.
Hmm.
So what happens with technology that people say for technology branding is not as important, like it is in
Hmm.
FMCG where all the products are very similar or almost the same. But look at what's happened. The example that we just spoke about are all
Hmm.
technology.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
don't need a first mover advantage anymore. And look at what Apple's doing. Apple started doing the first smartphone,
Hmm.
and they today are saying we don't want to do things first.
Hmm.
We want to do things better.
Hmm.
So when the first mover advantage is gone in technology, what does that tell you? It says even in an industry like technology, you cannot just get by with the first mover advantage. It is about the brand you build. It is about how customers are looking up to you, how
Hmm.
customers are looking to envisage your idea of what the brand stands for and consume the narrative you're building for them.
Hmm.
And that is pretty much where your branding is. And the whole point of USP has been overrated. So there is differentiation, there
Hmm.
is distinction. And we get caught up in differentiation all the time. And I continue to work with a lot of FMCG brands even today. So the first thing they ask is our product is not very differentiated,
Hmm.
but most products aren't. So
Hmm.
you and I know the best products in the market don't really sell the most. So take paints, for example. Your Asian Paints by quality, I'm not sure is the best paint in the country,
Hmm.
but they are the number one brand in the country. And nobody is even thinking of taking on Asian Paints.
Hmm.
Very few do. The people are always vying for the number two position in the paints category.
Hmm.
Because Asian Paints established such a strong brand.
Hmm.
I think Axonoble's Dulux, right? The brand,
Hmm.
their
Yes.
brand on a technical level, I think is sometimes claimed to be superior. Not
Hmm.
sure what the technicalities are,
Hmm.
but that doesn't seem to matter at all to anybody
Hmm.
because your brand can actually get people to overlook the deficiency in your product. If it's not, I mean, you can't deliver a bad product, but people are willing to forego certain deficiencies in a product as long as they can have the brand experience.
See, on that front, at least, because I worked closely with that category,
Mm-hmm.
and I've gotten to understand the rules of that category, for the benefit of everybody, I can possibly say that these kind of categories have two, three customers. Yeah. Which is different from how FMCG brands operate.
Mm-hmm.
There is the consumer who is finally getting the house painted, and then there is the contractor and the dealer who are the intermediaries who
Right.
help the consumer consume the paint, because the consumer doesn't paint the house themselves.
Right.
Now what Asian Paints has done is obviously have a MVP for the consumer.
Right.
So the product might not I don't know the technicalities, but might not be the best out there. Yeah, but it is good enough, and consumer will never complain about it. What they've done, however, is that in their service bundle
Mm-hmm.
they have built such significant advantages for contractors and dealers that they will find it difficult to go get those advantages with any other brand.
Right.
The kind of service model that Asian Paints has created, the kind of predictive mechanisms they have
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that they are able to get their shades right,
Right.
get the stocking right, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else in the industry has.
Right.
And therefore, the service offering itself is differentiated for the dealers and the contractors.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And for consumers, what you're saying is that they
Mm-hmm.
have invested into branding
Mm.
to make sure that they always remain ahead.
Right.
Yeah. And that'll always remain true, especially in commodity markets.
Right.
Yeah.
So just to take you up on that point now, Asian Paints got this network of influencers, if I can call them that,
Hmm.
critical influencers who are the implementers, the customers, as you put it. Now, even if another brand managed to build a network of these influencers, it is the it is the end consumer who's actually going to pay for it.
Hmm.
The consumer's confidence in saying yes to an Asian Paints when recommended by this customer is far higher than the same customer, or rather the channel partner or the influencer recommending another brand. I
Hmm.
think the same goes for Fevicol. The moment you say these brand names, right, you don't want to move away from them. The customer's inclination to say yes to these brands is
Hmm.
because the brand has been built in such a manner. I'm not saying the backend is easy to build. I'm saying even if the backend was built by another brand, the consumer affinity will make them decide in favor of Asian Paints and Fevicol.
Think you had made your point earlier
Mm.
also by saying that despite being the first mover, Paytm invested significantly in building the brand.
Right.
Yeah. So when they said Paytm Karo was as much about, creating a habit with people, as much about making Paytm synonymous with all kind of digital payments.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
therefore they also felt the need that despite being the first mover, they will need a brand to remain ahead.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
You're listening to COB, Conversations on the Business of Brands. Your hosts are Sudeep Chawla, marketing practitioner, business leader, and educator to advertising and marketing professionals, and Sharavana Raghavan of Vitril Innovations, consultants to consumer facing brands and businesses. For more information, go to copcast.net. If you find this podcast helpful, please help us by telling your friends and rating us.
Okay. So for example, we spoke about Asian Paints, we spoke about Fevicol.
Hmm.
Yeah. And therefore we said that these are the product brands which
Hmm.
invested into becoming consumer brands,
Right.
and which gives them sustainable growth advantage.
Right.
Yeah. Could you just deconstruct how could brand building
Hmm.
give growth advantage
Hmm.
to a particular brand or a product?
Right. So when I say, we just discussed about how the consumer's affinity to say yes drives growth. I think that's the
Hmm.
most commonsensical example we can use. But say when a brand is built successfully enough, it gives the business a sense of insulation to
Hmm.
even to external factors. Like, for example, the pandemic that just happened or
Hmm.
is happening. I don't know if it's over.
Hmm.
But the brands that were built strong, they actually feel the pinch or feel the hurt of an external trend a lot later than the smaller brands do. And they also have the tendency to bounce back a lot faster.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we are now zeroing in around the anniversary of 9/11.
Hmm.
And Southwest is a great brand we can discuss. We can go on and on about how the brand was built, but just the snippet of what happened during 9/11, it's also documented that all the airlines were grounded and they are a budget airline.
Hmm.
I don't think they even had a loyalty program. But the passengers who had flown Southwest, they realized how much losses Southwest is making.
Hmm.
And they voluntarily sent in checks saying, you
Hmm.
guys must be going through a bad time, here's my money.
Hmm.
And this was done even without the brand asking for it.
Hmm.
So that is the power of a brand.
Hmm.
When you are building your own business, it's only you fighting for it.
Yeah.
But when you build a brand, your consumers start fighting for it. There is this
Hmm.
example of Satyam Cinemas in Chennai,
Hmm.
and it's become, or rather, it was such a core part of the Chennai culture
Mm-hmm.
that when Satyam was to be sold to PVR, people took
Hmm.
out a protest. It says, you can't sell our Satyam to PVR.
Nice.
Obviously, none of the protesters had a legal claim to the property or
Hmm.
the brand,
Hmm.
but they felt so close to the brand
Hmm.
that they were personally hurt that the brand was being sold.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that is the power of a brand that you build. And
Hmm.
the more
Hmm.
consistently you build it, it's not just you, people are pulling it with you, and that's when exponential growth begins.
Hmm.
And today, people are not just looking to transact, people are looking for connection. And businesses tend to ignore the fact that they're looking for connection and stick to just transactions. And you need just to make them feel special, take them on as partners, and build your brand with them. And why do people even go to Starbucks? I
Hmm.
go to Starbucks. The coffee is not the greatest. And they don't even claim to sell coffee anymore. It's just the experience of being there. The consistency of the experience that you get at Starbucks
Hmm.
is all that you're going there for. And that is the brand. Starbucks today is even considered a bank. They seem to have more money than other banks do because of their loyalty program. What is their loyalty
Hmm.
program? You buy 10 coffees for 500 rupees, then give you one coffee free. And
Hmm.
people are still willing to pay for it. People pay in advance for it. People pay so much in advance that they're so cash rich as a brand.
Hmm.
And I mean, it's more in the US than anywhere else, but even here, their Starbucks cards are picking up pretty fast and they're
Hmm.
doing a lot of business on their Starbucks card.
Hmm.
So, so the crux is that with or without a product difference, your brand that is preferred by customers will always soar ahead of anybody who's even tangibly better than yours as a product or
Hmm.
service.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. And even with a non-differentiated product, the second point that I'm building
Mhm.
is that even with a non-differentiated product, you can find ways of emotionally engaging your consumers so that they remain invested in the brand.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Fair. So, just to build conviction amongst our listeners that you are somebody who runs a branding and brand strategy company.
Mhm.
I am a marketer by profession.
Mhm.
So, people will see us as biased parties here. Let's, do you have any studies, any independent research that talks about this one?
So this is a question that I get asked often, saying
Hmm.
you will say branding is important because you're a brand consultant. No, it's actually the reverse that's true. I'm a brand consultant because I believe branding is important. That's
Mm-hmm.
therefore I see the opportunity there.
Hmm.
But see, I'm sure there's a lot of research that's been done, but the clearest one that I've read is in this book called The Long and Short of It by, I think it's called Phil and Binet or Binet. I'm not sure how to pronounce the name. I'll put it in the notes.
Mm-hmm.
But they make the argument that short term activity gives you only short term results. And the long holding principle is that brand building is for the long term only. So what their theory says is that brand building gives you short term results also
Hmm.
and gives you long term benefits.
Hmm.
Just that in the short term, the results by the activations or short term activities that we run are
Hmm.
far more measurable and identifiable and significant compared to the short term results of brand building.
Hmm.
A brand building's short term benefits are not absent, but they can seem marginal in the larger scope of things right now.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
But over time, they become so exponential that they help your activations give you better returns.
Hmm.
And they also go into a point where they say very clearly the long term is not a collection of short terms.
Hmm.
So we have a lot of tendencies to say my short terms will build me up to the long term. They say that's not true. The
Yeah.
moment you break that up into short terms, your brand building goes back to a zero base if you don't have a
Hmm.
holistic long term thinking. So
Hmm.
your long term is always better than a collection of short terms.
Hmm.
And but what they say is that it's not an either or approach. People
Hmm.
don't have to choose between activation, short term benefits versus long term benefits.
Hmm.
They say
Hmm.
people who say do this or that are pretty much idiots. A business has to survive today to thrive tomorrow. So
Yeah.
survival is important.
Yeah.
So they advise a split, they advise a balance between the two. I'm not
Hmm.
very convinced about what exactly this they say invest 60% of your marketing spends on brand building and 40% on activations. But
Hmm.
I don't believe that. I don't
Hmm.
believe that rule should hold. I think what they mean to say is that prioritize your brand building more. I think 60% for brand building when they say it says brand building is more important.
Hmm.
But I think people shouldn't read too much into the split they're giving. It'll
Hmm.
vary from a brand's needs, a category activity. So it has a lot of permutations and combinations. So
Hmm.
it should be used to say, how am I splitting my money between my short term and my long term benefits?
Hmm.
And what is important to me? It's a marketer's call.
Yeah.
But you need to prioritize both at the same time. And that's what I take away from there. And
Hmm.
that this is proven by research. It's the book, I repeat, it's the long and short of it. It's the book that they've written. I'll put that in the notes. Take a look at it. And if you can buy it, and I think it's definitely worth your time as a marketer.
Okay. So you've given fair bit of examples and research, Sharon.
Hmm.
However, most of them have, you know, are brands built in primarily US, except
Yes.
maybe Paytm that we spoke about. Yeah.
Yeah. Fevicol and Nation Paints also. But yeah.
But again, those are brands that have been built over a very, very long period of time.
True,
Yeah.
true. You're right.
Paytm is possibly which can come closer, which most of our listeners possibly will be able to relate to. Yeah. Is
Right.
there any other example that has really impressed you and you would want to
Mhm.
quote it for our listeners, that they can study and then possibly seek to emulate some parts of it?
This is where you get me to shoot myself in the foot, right? Because my entire spiel in this episode has been about how brands are not doing it, and you put me on a spot to say, how is the brand doing it? I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
no, but it's not like nobody's doing it.
Hmm.
So one brand that actually comes to mind when I think of the new age brands getting branding right is Mama. So
Hmm.
they have done phenomenally well in the story that they've built for consumers.
Mm-hmm.
So they have spoken about safety that's
Hmm.
good enough for your baby and it is
Hmm.
natural. These
Hmm.
are pretty much the takeaways. And the point is, it is nothing new.
Hmm.
Baby cat brands have been saying this forever.
Hmm.
That safety for your baby, this is how you care for your baby. And even carcinogenic brands have been saying that.
Hmm.
Say it is safety and that is why it is for your baby. And people have been buying it. To get
Yeah.
into that category, cut clutter with the same proposition takes branding. That
Mm-hmm.
is what I call. I'm not talking about the identity logo, all that's great. But the way they built the narrative around it has been magical. And what they've done is they've started with their own story. They
Hmm.
started with their own personal story. The way they framed it is that they wanted something for their baby, and when they couldn't find it, they went out and made the best version possible. And that already puts their product on such a pedestal that it's
Hmm.
preferred by parents,
Hmm.
and it is by parents for the babies.
Hmm.
And they even call themselves, right? The founders call themselves the chief mom and the chief dad,
Hmm.
and that's the aura they're building around it.
Hmm.
And they've been consistently treating their business. I mean, everybody says the business is the baby. For them, their
Hmm.
business has actually been the baby. And
Hmm.
I remember they even had a baby photographer come in to do their product shots.
Hmm.
I'm not sure it materialized into the effect they wanted,
Hmm.
but you get the thinking there, right? The
Hmm.
way they want the brand to be perceived, the way they want the products to be perceived, is from the parent outlook. They're talking to the parent and everybody. So we did this research for another consumer brand of ours. We're doing this
Hmm.
focus group, and we were talking
Hmm.
about personal care brands talking to the top of the pyramid, 1 lakh plus income households.
Hmm.
And we put a few brands in the mix.
Hmm.
And we asked them, so what drives credibility in a personal care brand for you? And they said claims and certifications.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there was one brand which had like 9 certifications and all that. And one brand had three, four, and there was Mama Earth, which had one certification, which is
Mm-hmm.
made safe. So when we asked them after a point, asked them to choose which brand do they trust the most. They
Mm-hmm.
said Mama Earth.
Hmm.
So he said, okay, you said certifications, but that brand has 9 certifications and Mama Earth has just one.
Hmm.
Why do you pick Mama Earth?
Hmm.
No, because it's Mama Earth. They such is the branding that they didn't just get there by running conversion campaigns, right? They've built the brand to cue safety, safe enough for babies, and
Hmm.
therefore safe enough for anybody.
Hmm.
I believe their branding has been done really well. How old are they? They must be what 2016, I think they started,
Yeah.
15 or 16.
Yeah. Yeah.
And look at how
I
big they
guess
become.
16 or 17. Yeah.
Yeah. And look at how big a brand they've become already.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that is what brand building is.
Hmm.
And consumers start batting for you even before you do. And
Hmm.
that is what startup founders should focus on.
Hmm. 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 No, I think, Sharon, that's a great example. It is also relatable because it's been done somebody who looks or seems like us within the
Hmm.
Indian ecosystem.
Hmm.
Again, a digital first brand
Right.
who had all the opportunity to throw their entire money behind just performance marketing or
Exactly.
generating leads, etc.
Yep.
But they chose to focus on performance marketing alongside building a brand for themselves, so
Precisely.
that they are able to, as you were saying earlier, not
Hmm.
just do activations but do brand building
Hmm.
such that it keeps helping them get better return on their investment every
Right.
time that they choose to invest behind the brand. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Excellent. I think you know you've capped that discussion with an excellent example, and possibly have made a very very cogent point for all small business owners to consider.
Hmm.
And before we wrap this up, I think it is only prudent for us to just summarize what
Right.
we discussed.
Sure.
So, and please correct me wherever I go wrong.
Oh,
So, we spoke
sure.
about the fact that a lot of the focus of business owners remains on process versus the branding.
Mm-hmm.
And the case that you made was that it is not either or.
Mm.
Process is improvement. You need to definitely get your service offering right or your product offering right, but not at the cost of branding. The branding should happen alongside.
Right.
And the claim that you made was the more you invest into branding, the better returns it will give you in the longer run.
Right.
Yeah. You also quoted a study
Mm-hmm.
which is published in a book called The Long and Short of It.
Right.
Yeah. Where they speak about the fact that over a period of time, it has been proven that brand building helps in short term as well as long term,
Right.
even if it might not seem measurable in the short term.
Right.
Yeah. We spoke about the fact that branding goes beyond just your product label, website design, etc. Yeah, those are some of the elements that are possibly
Branding.
visible to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But brand building is not the same as branding. Yeah. So
Right.
therefore, branding elements will be dime a dozen. Those are the shiny objects, as Sharon calls them. But brand building is goes beyond tangibles and forms a lot of intangible trust, affection, faith that you build in the brand.
Right.
Uh, that gets then reflected in the consumer affinity that you are able to generate.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And this consumer affinity keeps giving you repeatable, sustainable growth over a period of time. Yeah.
Right.
And,
Right.
finally, we spoke about the fact that there are a number of Indian as well as American examples of brands that have been able to transcend their product boundaries and create such trust in consumers' hearts, such that the consumers have uh, you know risen above other similar looking products with possibly better certifications or more shinier packaging, etc.,
Right.
to shower their love, affection, as well as money on these brands which have been able to create uh, real consumer brands over a period of time.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the whole point is, if you build a business, you'll fight for it. If you build a brand, the consumers will fight along with you for it. Simple
Hmm.
as that.
Excellent. So I think for all of you out there, build a business, build a brand, and that should hold you, in good stead in the long run.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to COB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharavana Raghavan. Subscribe and learn more at cobcast.net. That's COBBCAST.net.